yes. And I was, for years, was not comfortable performing any secular music. God and Gigs came out of God saying, you're the one that's creating this artificial struggle in your life. He wasn't telling me not to play Luther Vandross or Stevie Wonder. I was.
Funny thing about a calling is it doesn't always show up with a job description. Sometimes it's just a tug that you can't ignore. You know, we keep climbing that mountain, but it seems like that mountain keeps getting taller.
So true. But I love the fact that we've been doing a lot of this discussion in my church and my staff, at the church staff. And they have been really kind of talking about the fact that the mission never really ends, right? Jesus gave us the great co-mission.
Right.
So co, obviously with him. So we're not doing it by ourselves, but then mission means to be sent. But of course, as we know, like once you've been sent, that doesn't mean that he stops you. Now you go to the next town, or you go to the next city, or you go to the next assignment, or whatever it is. And, you know, it doesn't end until Paul says, I fought a good fight. I finished my course. I have kept the faith. So he doesn't finish the course until God's like, all right, that's it. No more cities. You're coming home with me. This is where, again, it can feel like, especially as content creators and the whole, like you said, the grind of social media and releasing new albums and books and everything, it can feel almost like this is never ending, and it feels unfulfilling because you think there has to be some goal, some plaque, some YouTube plaque or something that shows that you've made it. And I think for both of us in our communities, I think what we're trying to help people understand is that is actually the winning, the journey cliche that you mentioned.
Yeah.
It's winning every day. It's knowing that if my course is finished today, I've won today. I've served well today. I can hear a well done today versus hear this well done at the end of some arbitrary list of goals that we set up for ourselves and then feel that if we don't achieve them somehow that God is not going to be pleased. So I feel like that's the war. The war is with yourself and with ourselves to not get caught up in these external metrics. Again, not that we shouldn't try to be successful.
Sure.
But I think when we create an identity out of reaching that, it becomes like a golden calf, right? We make our own golden calf and then we're mad because God's like, that's you. Like you formed that thing, the idol to worship, and it didn't satisfy you.
Yeah.
Because you didn't wait for me to just come down and give you, hey, 10 commandments, follow these, you're good. You know, it's like we form our own calf of accomplishment that we're trying to reach. And it's on us to reject that, to say, no. Whatever God has for us, whatever that goal is creatively, 10 likes, whatever it is that we feel like we have to get beyond to like be successful. I think we have to look back and say, no, did I accomplish my mission for today?
So I think that's an interesting thing you bring that up because it segments into some of the discussion topics I wanted to go over with you. And one of them was our calling versus our career. There's a common theme that you have to be struggling to be an artist, but also when you think about it, I mean, and you touched on this. I was reading your book, Gods and Gigs, or is it Gigs and Gods? There's a lot of ways that you can prove that you are devoted to God. Him asking you to be broke to prove that devotion is not one of them. Someone with values doesn't have to limit their creativity to preaching. Sometimes there's more to us than just going to church.
God and gigs. And
God
always
and
one God. Yeah, I always have to make sure that people...
Yeah. So as I was reading that, it talked about a separation of your spiritual journey and your professional journey. And I just wanted to get your feedback on that. So what is your thoughts for a struggling artist when they're trying to figure out how to balance their calling versus their career?
This is so good. And so in the book, one of the things that I was really trying to be very transparent about was that for a long time, I tried to make those synonymous, right? My calling and my career had to be synonymous. Therefore, like I said, if I wasn't 100% into it, and it sounds strange to say this, but if I wasn't 100% identified by music ministry, worship ministry, that calling and that career had to be synonymous, and that's all I could do. So for many years, I want to make sure people understand this. When I wrote God and Gigs, the whole point was I was called out of full-time ministry out to do gigs. Usually we say it the other way around. God called me out of the gigs, out of the clubs, out of the secular world, into just doing the God thing. God did the reverse for me. So for me, it was a radical shifting of my understanding that my career and my calling had to be the same, that my calling as a minister could still be intact while I did a career outside of church. That was a radical shift.
Your art isn't less holy because somebody pays you for it. Just because you take jobs that aren't inside of church walls, it doesn't mean that you're stepping away from God. God's out there too.
So a calling to me is the vocation, the calling out of what you will do and your purpose in life. Your career is how, but not the why.
Right.
The calling is the why. The calling is so that you can accomplish mission, so you can bless others, so you can create more beauty, art in the world. But your career may simply be the way in which you support that mission, the way in which you kind of work out that mission, or it might be the way that that God gives you to support your family and has nothing to do specifically with the actual work of the mission or the ministry, right? So
Yeah.
this is why a plumber, this is why God says in Colossians, do all things unto the Lord, right? Because the plumber at the time may not feel like plunging a toilet is giving God glory.
Sometimes the scariest part about being a creative isn't failure, it's success in the wrong direction.
I get it. But in the way that you do that and the way you do it faithfully, like we talked about with my dad, just showing up and building something great. I think it was either Luther or C.S. Lewis, I can't remember who said it, but talked about that, what we do, if it's making the shoes, right? Not to put little crosses on the shoes to show that God gave, that is for God, but to make excellent shoes.
Yeah.
That is what it is. So I think the calling again is what God calls us to be and what to do and how we serve the world. But it doesn't necessarily equate to the career specifically, that it has to match up where every single calling has to be lined up with this career where all the skills are then acted out in the career, which is why, once again, for me, I'm always going to be a minister. However, I will not always be a career minister.
We're not always running from our ministry. Sometimes we're running from the version of ourselves that we just thought we had to be. You want to keep your art something that would also please God. I mean, you may not be, doing a church gig or something, but maybe you're doing another gig and they want you to play things that you're just not comfortable playing. How do you balance
100%.
that kind of stability or that kind of...
Yes. I love sharing on this because, again, it never fails to hit a nerve where we're already at. So I always start by telling people, when I wrote my book, I was writing my book to people who were not if you play a secular song that God's going to get you and strike you down. So I was already trying to make sure that I wasn't trying to convince people that thought that playing secular music or doing any kind of secular art, right? Movies, films, whatever, where God's not mentioned, where it might be questionable content, and those people thinking that somehow we were like out of the will of God. So I didn't even want to have that argument. The phrase that I use in the book, and I also quote, is from a philosopher that said, there's nothing over which the sovereign Lord does not cry out, mine.
Right.
So there's really no line, technically, like we just talked about. Everything that belongs to the world, belongs in the world, is God's.
Turns out the dark places weren't all that dark at all. Sometimes you just have to open your eyes when you're there. Sometimes God closes a door you were never supposed to be standing behind.
And so therefore now it's discernment. It's not this kind of artificial, oh, I can't play a love song. I can't play a song that has any kind of sexual innuendo. I can't play anything, these things, because I have to constantly judge every single piece of content that comes out of my lips. Or like, is there discernment? Yes, there should not be a fear, because the Bible says that perfect love casts out all fear. So we're not worried or fearful of touching the wrong things. What we want to use is discernment. Is how can I best, again, we talked about this, serve the world, serve the church, or serve the people that I'm working with without crossing the line where I am actually not doing good for them. Me creating some kind of salacious material is not good for them. Now, is it good for my employer at the time? Perhaps. Was Daniel called to serve the Babylonian princes? Yes. Were the things that the Babylonian princes and Nebuchadnezzar and you name it, were all of their things good? Probably not. We don't talk about that part about Daniel and Moses and every single other major prophet that served the foreign pagan king.
Right.
So there are times that you are called to do something that you personally would not have chosen, but you have to do in the area of a mission, a job, which you would not have chosen yourself. However, here's where you have the influence. What happened in every single one of those influences or instances where someone was serving a foreign king? They always seem to be pointed out for their excellence. And that excellence got them influence that changed the heart of the very person that they were serving. So the question is not whether I should be creating the song, doing the song where I feel like, oh, I shouldn't be playing this because people won't see me and I'll be a bad witness. Are there times for discernment of that? Of course. And I believe God will open the door and the Holy Spirit will tell you with wisdom when to step away from those things. But what I try to push for is how can you show up as a light in a dark place? You cannot show up as a light until you're in darkness. Some of us are called to stay in the light, stay in the church. So some of us, we're not supposed to be there. But some of us are called to be a light in a dark place. And it's how you show up in those places and how do you demonstrate the love of God in a very weird, kind of awkward place where you don't feel like you belong, but you are supposed to show the light by the way you behave and by the way you carry yourself in a certain area, or while you're producing something that you might find questionable.
Being a light doesn't mean hiding in the brightest room. Sometimes the creative life map that we have in our heads doesn't actually match the terrain we're walking on. Callings are not fragile things. Our egos are.
And you're assuming that because I am around that I am, like you said, of it, right? In the world, not of the world. But I might be the only voice of the gospel that band will hear. The hardest part, if I had to be honest, is the second guessing yourself on whether or not this is going to work. It could be, okay, God, this is the third time I tried to get a gig and the bill didn't get paid or I didn't get paid on time. And hey, what's going on here? You said I was supposed to do this and this is not paying the bills. Or the personal kind of questioning, am I cut out for this? Am I being ignored? Am I not good enough? So that internal struggle, the going to bed and wondering, okay, and I'm not just talking about the job thing because that's the career, obviously, right? The career part, but also the questioning of my own identity. I wrote a blog post way back that really kind of was honestly one of the hardest ones to write because it was admitting that I didn't know what it felt like to be loved because I was equating all of my love and my acceptance on my performance. And that included in my job, in ministry, in my family. I thought everything was based on if I do good, then I'm loved. If I mess up, I'm not. And that's a hard thing to deal with, man. All of us artists have to deal with that. But I think to face it and realize, oh my gosh, am I okay with myself? Like, do I like myself? You know what I mean? This is, so that has been the hardest part because in a sense, I always try to be careful not to say creatives and non-creatives and kind of make this artificial differentiator between people. Like, we're all people.
Exactly.
But people do, creatives do deal with a lot more self-assessment and self-reflection and honestly, than self-degrading. Because we keep thinking that there's something out there beyond the rainbow that will make us accepted by all these people. When our art is accepted, then we're accepted.
Alan had to stop and ask the question, who am I when the music stops? This wasn't a crisis of faith. It was a crisis of identity. As a creative, Alan didn't lose his calling. He just stopped confusing it with his paycheck.
There's the guru and the Sherpa.
Right.
There's the guy that stands on the top of the mountain and says, follow me and do everything I've done, right? But they don't have to climb the mountain. They're sitting at the top of the mountain in that little pose.
Yeah.
And then there's the Sherpas, which actually go down to base camp, take you all the way up the mountain, just walk a few steps ahead so you don't kill yourself, right? And then they go right back down and they get the next crew and they bring them up the mountain. So I see myself as a Sherpa. That's where I'm at right now. As a creative,
probably the Sherpas who took the guru up there in the first place.
Exactly. And no one asked the guru, like, hey, how did you get up in the first place? But the guru doesn't come back down. So now that I've been able to live out this creative lifestyle for so many years, it's changing again.
Right.
And so what worked in my 30s and 40s will not work in my 50s, and it will not work for the next generation of people that I'm trying to help. So I've got to keep up with AI. I've got to keep up with, okay, well, what am I going to do as a musician releasing albums in an era of streaming and AI music? Like, how do I do that? So I'm trying to learn and figure things out.
In the end, God doesn't change. We do. If God trusts us enough to give us a gift of creativity, maybe he trusts us enough to use it outside the walls of a church house.
this is where I'm trying to get the right language to where I'm at right now. What's next? And so many of my friends and our friends are part-time musicians, part-time artists, part-time authors. They got a full-time job. They got a part-time job. They got a side hustle. They have all these different things. And I felt like, okay, well, where does mine fit? I still work in the church. I've been able to be blessed to have a position in the church where I do have a vocation, a paid position. Right. But I'm also blessed to be able to have the freedom to perform, to play music, play jazz, do all this kind of stuff. And I'm still performing and building I'm still teaching and building my creator career as a speaker and as a podcaster.
Right.
There's no blueprint for that.
No.
Nobody says, okay, hey, here's how you become a podcaster, author, teacher, minister. Like, nobody says that, right?
But if you go on YouTube, there's always going to be someone who will tell you that
yes, and now I'm trying to be that guy, right? And so my answer to your question is, I am trying to formulate my unique creator lifestyle so that it informs all of the other things that have been poured into me over the last 30 to 40 years as a creator.
Listen, folks, I myself am a man of God. I have very strong values, strong convictions. I feel that I have a calling on this earth, but that doesn't mean that I need to be preachy all the time, especially when it comes to my art. As long as I am true to who I am and to who I feel that God wants me to be, I don't have to create art that just preaches. I can create art that entertains and find ways to bring people closer to God in ways that are uniquely my own. Thank you for joining me here today. If you would like to learn more, feel free to check out my website at lightmindedarts.com or check out one of these other videos that you just might find you like. I'll see you next time.